Well, first of all, I wish to thank you for the possibility of being here. Madame Lumière asked, talked about the money involved in European projects, and she wondered about the value for money in this case of European projects. My interest was put in touch different people that were doing similar things, and be here to explain a European project under the light of the sixth framework program is interesting in order to generate synergies and externalities between the two projects. I will try to be relaxed without thinking that at 3 o'clock I will have to be on board a train. Sorry about the speed. I won't be able to avoid. My presentation is in English. I thought I could talk in English. It has been a surprise to see that we have a good team of translators. I will talk in Spanish. I have a very heavy Catalan accent. I'm sorry about my accent. And there we go. We were talking before about the importance of networks and the context. Raúl said that the context seems to be interesting. I have tried to combine Pau's question when he said, is there a MED model for cultural creation? Well, it depends. It depends. Maybe. Under the light of the statistical results, we could define or interpret whatever we wish. As economists say, the Accra project, the project I'm going to describe today, didn't just deal with creative class, but the importance of the context for this creative class. Context means the city. So my first question, Pau's question, as a matter of fact, Sostenuto's question is whether there is a Mediterranean model for creative and knowledge workers. The Accra project doesn't only involve the cultural class, but also knowledge workers. If you Google Accra Creative, you will see the information about this project and the definition of creative sectors and knowledge sectors, but I'm not going to speak about this. In front of Pau's question, are they really different? Creative workers and knowledge workers, are they different to the rest of workers? Do they have any specific characteristic? There are some questions that have been repeated this morning by Raúl, and I will try to answer based on work carried out in Utrecht, also with European funds. They mix arts and economy, which is something very interesting and unthinkable in Spain. There are actual differences between the employment marketplace, the production and the market the product is addressed to. Obviously, the participation of unconventional or informal employment is relevant. There are highly creative people that produce creative products but do not obtain an income from that. They can be cashiers in a supermarket, for example. It is also true that for cultural products and knowledge products, it is very difficult to find a parameter to ascertain the quality of the product. How do we know that a music product is high quality or not? I don't know how we could, for example, count the number of people going to a concert in order to assess the quality of the concert, or the importance of intuitive or emotional assessment. I'm sure that this presentation can be downloaded from any website. I wish to insist on three important elements that draw a difference between these sectors. Sometimes we say that these sectors are involved in traditional production sectors, that there is a complex relationship between what we understand as culture and as creativity. Madame Lalumière said something about this yesterday, and the importance of the uh, small productive fabric as creative firms or businesses. In these sectors, we have the convergence of two different elements. In some uh, sectors that could be called knowledge or creation sectors that are highly international, addressed to the global market, for example, software production or computer game production, but these sectors are highly dependent on local culture, language, local language, audiences, and so on. This would be another question. Another difference would also be that in some of these sectors, there is a high participation of the private sector, small initiatives. This idea of the small entrepreneur exists there. And it is also true that certain cultural sectors are highly dependent on public subsidies. So there is a difference between workers and traditional workers and sectors and what we contemplate as innovative sectors. But this is not what I wanted to explain. I wanted to explain the importance of the city region. This is a concept that has been invented. City region. I'm not a geographer, I'm an economist, but it's a way to solve many problems. We talk about city region. Valencia is not only a city, the city of Valencia, but a number of municipalities that surround the city and interact with the city of Valencia. In my project, there is no city that coincides with the Sostenuto city. But Ljubljana is a city I like very much, and this is why I wanted to show you Ljubljana pictures when we talk about city region. If we talk about a region, we may wonder, one of the many things we should wonder today, politicians, local politicians in many municipalities in Europe should wonder how we can turn the traditional specialized city, a city specialized in traditional industries, for example, the automobile industry, into a city where knowledge and culture are the pillars that allow the development of the city, or turning that black, dirty city into a clean city full of culture and knowledge. We should have these three theories with a magic wand that could turn this dirty city into a clean city. In the Accra project, we wanted to know what were the conditions that were important for the development of creative and knowledge industries in certain urban regions of Europe. This was the research question upon which we worked from 2007 to 2010. The European projects facilitate, for example, these Sostenuto labs, the case studies from 13 cities, from 13 examples, capital cities, cities that were not capital, southern cities, northern cities. Some of them could be considered Mediterranean. Beyond Barcelona, Toulouse is not very Mediterranean because it is closer to the Atlantic. Milan is French Mediterranean style, or Sofia, Budapest, I don't know, doubtful. It is really difficult to answer Pau's question. based on my 4-year study on these cities, whether there is a Mediterranean model or not. But I think that some interesting reflections are worthwhile based on the outcome of this project. There is a representation of cities that are eastern cities and that have been quickly transformed towards market economies. And then we have traditional cities of Western Europe. As a matter of fact, the Accra project feeds on 5 theoretical approaches. It was a multidisciplinary project. We weren't all of us economists. We have sociologists, anthropologists, geographers. The coordinators were geographers from Amsterdam, and there were some architects. The theoretical approach was multidisciplinary, with different theories that reflected a certain view of the city. These theories, to sum up, were related to structural factors that determine the present of a city. We'll talk about this path dependency. We are here because we have a past that influences our current times. The classical theories of location, where businesses are located, where there is good transport connectivity, and so on. Theories related to the cluster. If we are all together, we are going to create synergies among us. This is a picture from 22 Ad, which is an industrial district in Barcelona. 2 plus 2 will be 5, not 4. The soft element theory, the Florida theory, which means to discover at the right time and place, and even before 2007, otherwise it would have been dreadful. The idea that life quality is influential to locate talents in cities. These are the soft conditions. This is a picture of the Barcelona beach, similar to the Malvarosa beach, that is the high life quality in certain points, at least theoretically, in Southern Europe, as well as other aspects linked to theories on individual pathways and the importance of networks in these creative and knowledge sectors. Based on this, we defined 6 classification criteria of these city regions that we were studying. And in a way, we said, let's take a look at Amsterdam. Amsterdam is well known on a political level as a city where decisions are adopted, known as a cultural and historical center. It is a city that is very welcoming to foreigners. It is an active city. It has active policies in terms of innovation, a city where there is a certain governance. These 6 attributes, based on these 6 theoretical approaches, allowed us to say what theory would suggest. For example, based on these approaches, Barcelona and Amsterdam, among the case studies, would be the cities where most requirements were met. And so they would be in a good position to attract creative and knowledge sectors, followed by Munich and Dublin, like Barcelona and Amsterdam, but less tolerant, less plural. Birmingham, Helsinki, and Milan had a different structure based on this criteria, and theoretically, eastern cities logically would be disadvantages as compared to the other cities because they didn't meet almost any of the conditions that I have mentioned before. But theory was not equal to the empirical evidence. There were some discrepancies. This is Boston city. If you didn't have the opportunity to visit it, it's a beautiful city that actually works very well as an engine to attract knowledge. It is an eastern city, not very well known, but there are some discrepancies.
So what is the empirical evidence that the Accra project is offering? So if we're going to try and answer this question by giving you some of the empirical evidence found on this project. Something we wanted to determine was the reasons for these people, these workers, living in the region. The project looked at workers in the sector of knowledge and the creative sector, managers of these companies, and transnational immigrants who were highly skilled. So what are the reasons for these people living there? When we looked at the group of workers, what was surprising were these responses. You wouldn't expect some of the reasons. For example, you wouldn't think that some of the soft factors would be the factors that attracted the people to this town. Among the most important soft factors, except the case of Riga, these soft factors were not the most significant reasons for people living in these cities. In relative terms, the most important factors were the red factors, the relational factors, factors not only related to professional networks or social networks, but to the background, the professional background of the people being surveyed. They had lived in this town, their parents had lived in this town, and they had chosen the town to carry out their creative activities. When they were asked what were the main factors, the four main factors out of a list of 26 for their living in a specific region, there were two factors that were highly significant. One, personal networks, and two, the possibility of having job opportunities. So creative people and people working in the knowledge sector felt that it was important to have these networks and to be able to use these networks for job opportunities. I think it's important to point out here that there is no significant differences between cities. There are differences, but there is not a great majority of people in these cities that felt that these two factors were the most relevant. When we spoke to managers, just like in the case of workers, we carried out a survey. In the case of managers, we had in-depth interviews. Here we found a number of new elements emerging. The managers of these companies determined that certain hard factors were important. For example, infrastructures, the availability of a pool of workers. But it was also important that both professional networks and personal networks were important. Not as important for people working in the sector, but they were important. Bearing in mind the small scope of creative companies and knowledge-based companies, networks are highly important. When we looked at transnational immigrants, again, job opportunities, not only the opportunity to find employment, but to find the employment they liked, also personal background, and also people working in the knowledge sector mainly came to these cities because the large companies sent them there, whereas creative people decided to go to these cities or towns. What was the level of satisfaction with the city? Here I'm going to focus mainly on the workers. What was their level of satisfaction? Generally speaking, the level of satisfaction was high. And here I have somebody who lives in Milan. Oh, sorry, no, in Venice. But he works in Milan. So we find that workers in Munich were highly satisfied with the city, but the workers in Milan were more dissatisfied with their city. When we asked, and when the people at Barcelona town hall saw this, they became a bit concerned, but they asked for their evaluation of the city compared to 5 years ago. Those who can't read the slide, the first part is shown in blue, and this it represents the people who felt that the city had improved over the past 5 years. We have Birmingham, which is a city that has implemented important transformation process in response to the needs of people who worked there. And they also changed good public policies. But we also have countries like Leipzig, Poznan, and so on, and cities like Barcelona, where interesting questions were raised. Well, this survey took place in the year 2007. And at that time in Barcelona, there was approximately 50% of the population surveyed felt that the city had worsened. Life in the city was worse than 5 years previously. So there are some things that will be very familiar to you if you have worked on Sostenuto. There were significant differences in the case of satisfaction with the city. In the case of satisfaction, job satisfaction, the majority of people felt satisfied with their job. Because of salaries? Well, no, salary wasn't the main reason. The top part of the column, the blue, is highly satisfied. The pale blue part show people who are highly dissatisfied with this aspect. And in the case of professional networks, people were very satisfied in their job, very often depending on these networks. Another interesting aspect and unique in this case was the working environment. How do you feel in your workplace? How do you feel working in a creative environment or a knowledge environment? This was quite important. Job security wasn't particularly important in respect of satisfaction in the case of these people. Regarding job expectations, as you can see, a lot of people were indifferent to this factor as far as job satisfaction was concerned. So in summary, there are two important elements: the significance of networks in these sectors and the importance of the work environment. And something that we were looking at throughout the project was to see whether Florida would be in agreement with these results, because the mobility of creative people or talent responded to these soft aspects. I don't have too much experience with Valencia, but I worked on the Barcelona case study. After 1992, there was a tremendous change in Barcelona. Barcelona became very well known after 1992. 1992 was a turning point in for the city, and it became a very well-known city. This is the second presentation where I show a cruise boat. I suppose it's very bad taste, bearing in mind the news we've had over recent days, but we do have a large number of cruisers that stop at Barcelona port. The metropolitan region is formed by 162 municipalities, which is a very large population, and Barcelona is highly specialized in diversity. We don't have any core industry. For example, in Helsinki, Nokia is a driving force in technology and communication. In Barcelona, we have a little bit of everything. And percentage of creative employment is over 20% in participation in the GDP. We are a cultural mix. We are an example of the Mediterranean way of life. It's an attractive city, but also it's a city where there are many events, and we have been host to many events, and we've taken advantage of these events to develop the city ever since the 19th century. I don't know if there's anybody here who can understand this fourth reason and understand that it's related to culture. At Barcelona City Hall, we have a leaflet that's entitled 10 Reasons to Invest in Barcelona. Obviously, it's addressed to Chinese. I don't understand Chinese, but I don't know if you can read here, but there are 4 words that are easy to understand: Picasso, Gaudí, Miró, and Dalí. So if they are using culture here, they're using culture as a way of attracting investment, and perhaps thinking that Chinese would find this attractive and invest in Barcelona. So the city has to be a city that will integrate networks in a way that is acceptable to professionals. Everybody knows that London and Paris are creative cities, but the non-human dimension of these cities sometimes means that people avoid these cities. And very often we have architects working in New York, earning large sums of money. Many of these people decided to go and work in Barcelona, earn less, because they liked the human aspects or the humane aspects of Barcelona. We are good in architecture, we're good in design, we're good in the history of art. So these soft factors, and of course this is an issue that is open to interpretation, are also a challenge. And to conclude, there are 4 significant elements in the competitiveness of this region and that have determined its positioning. The embeddedness of governance. So far, this has been quite successful in the city of Barcelona, and particularly the leadership role that has been undertaken by the City Hall. And I think if we want to relate this to some of the conclusions of the Sostenuto project, we would be talking about the capacity to provide channels that enable artists to exist in the city, and in other words, the integration of civil society as a way of projecting the city. the delivery of infrastructures, such as the new airport, that this airport does have airplanes. Okay, that wasn't Jai, but the people in Valencia. We have 2 airports. One of the airports doesn't have too much traffic, so a key element in education as a way to attract talent, innovation, and investment. A lot of people came to Barcelona on Erasmus programs, and eventually they decided to stay there. Barcelona has been very good at selling its image. In Milan, I was talking about the marketing or city branding, and I was talking about how Barcelona managed a very good branding. They were very successful. And in Milan, one of the things they said, well, we have Barcelona as an example of what not to do. It's true that what we have is a great increase in the number of English pubs, for example. But I think the Barcelona branding is an important issue, but perhaps we should take a new approach to this. The idea of clustering knowledge in an industry where there is no tradition of this, but we also need to have this idea of clustering companies throughout the city. So what's going to happen from now on? When I was listening to most of the previous presentations, a mention was made of involving culture as a driving force in social sustainability and cohesion. This was something that we looked at in the Accra project. But we need to have a less polarized society with fewer problems. And it's all very well to say we are a creative city, but obviously this should not exclude us. This should not make us a city that excludes people. If we become an exclusive city, we can be exclusive without excluding. And so I think this 4th angle, this 4th pillar for sustainability is important, but it's important to understand it on a broad base. And we have to talk about whether this is real culture or not. So, bearing in mind the limitation of my experience and my data, I would say that the Mediterranean model, in keeping with the models we have seen, well, I wouldn't be able to confirm the existence of a Mediterranean model, but what is obvious, and this is confirmed through the data, is that there exists a European model that is different from the American model or the American model as proclaimed by Florida. And it's obvious from the Accra project that many cities and many urban nuclei in the Mediterranean area share features in common, share common features, and this should help to attract creative workers and knowledge workers. I apologize for the speed of my presentation. This is my email address. If anybody's interested in sending me comments or questions, please use my email because I have to rush off.